And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, is my full-body swimwear made from sustainably produced bovine byproduct? And is that turkey vulture circling above due to nearby roadkill or my open, gaping wound? And now, the podcast host who loves his shed so much that he needed to double his pleasure, Pete Dominic.
Yeah, that is me. Thank you very much, Pete Co. Welcome to Stand Up with Pete Dominic Daily. I am very happy to have you here. Two excellent guests joining me on today's program. Climate scientist Dr. Michael Mann and comedian Corey Forrester, who has gotten very famous over the pandemic. And very excited to had an awesome conversation with him. Very excited to have you hear both of these conversations. Great to have you joining me here. Been a very weird and crazy last 24 hours or so for me. I'll get to the news and the world, but good heavens, I've been being attacked by almost entirely anonymous trolls on Twitter, and they've got my phone number, and they're texting me, threatening my family, and telling me to kill myself every few minutes or so. It's been pretty horrifying, and mostly just calling me a pedophile for a tweet I had about a little girl dancing and saying that it was cute and not sexual. Because a little girl and her family went to New York City. This is the way it looks like, at least. I don't have a journalistic report of this, but it's pretty clear what was going on here. Little girl was with her family, maybe 4 or 5 years old, in New York City. And they see some street dancers. They watch a show in the street. This happens all the time in New York and in cities all across the country, of course. They put out a hat and they start dancing. And some of the dancers twerk. And when they're done, the crowd goes wild. And so the little girl who was there watching the dancers, who knows nothing of twerking, starts twerking herself, starts dancing in the middle of the circle. Maybe they brought her out to dance with her, and she started mimicking them, and she gets attention. And everybody there thinks it's hilarious and cute. And then a guy on Twitter who is a white supremacist, fascist, Christian nationalist named Matt Walsh says that he would, if he were president, he would have all those people arrested. And then everybody says the girl is being sexualized and so on. And of course, none of that is what's happening. None of that is even remotely close as to what's happening. And even some people who like me and trust me, I think, were questioning my judgment on that scenario. Nobody that knows me obviously thinks I've done or said or would ever do anything, Jesus Christ, sexual to a child. And so I just think it's the equivalent of a bunch of guys sitting around the table, and one says something that includes the word fuck, and everybody laughs because he told a joke that included the word fuck at some point, ended on that word. And then so a little 3-year-old kid sitting by the table of people who saw the guy say fuck and get a laugh, then says fuck himself. And all the guys start laughing because it's hilarious. The kid doesn't know what it means. That's the same exact situation. Girl sees everybody dancing. Some of them are twerking. She goes out, she twerks too, everybody laughs because she doesn't know what she's doing. She's just mimicking somebody. The 3-year-old who said fuck doesn't know it's a, quote, bad word. He's just mimicking the guy who got laughs. That's what it was. That's what it is. It's innocent. It's children being children. And if you have a problem with that, then you have a problem with the adults. And I don't even know what the problem would be with the adults. The adults were watching people dance. They brought their kid. It was in public. It wasn't a promoted show. It wasn't a sexual show. Now, I'll give you a scenario where I think it's probably inappropriate. I think that if you're at a dance studio, my daughters were at dance studios in ballet and jazz and modern and tap and hip hop for years. And if it were choreographed for young girls to be twerking or humping the ground or doing something really kind of like overtly sexual, and it were choreographed by a teacher, I think that you could make a case as to that's probably not the best choreography. But I still wouldn't really care. Like, if they did that, I wouldn't take the teacher aside and be like, what are you doing? I just, because I don't know what that's supposed to, what is it? What is the problem? What is it leading to? What is the issue? I'm not going to shame sex. I'm not going to say that sex is bad. I think sex is beautiful. I think consensual sex between two people who want to have sex is great and fun, and it can be risky, of course, and you should do it responsibly. But same thing about a lot of other things that we enjoy in life. They can be risky, and you should do it responsibly. You can jump out of a plane, wear a parachute. You can have sex with a stranger you never met. Well, you should know the risks, and you should use protection. So, and you deal with the consequences. But I don't know. That's the way I see it. But I've been just bombarded with threats and to every social media platform. So it's been rough, and I will talk with you more about it tonight. I really want to get your reaction. I hope that you'll join me tonight to have a conversation about this and more tonight at our hangout. That's tonight at 8 p.m. If you're a subscriber to this podcast, a supporter, then you get to come and join us, and I'd really like to hear from you, including those of you that see any gradation or disagreement. I'm pretty sure no one's going to come and accuse me of doing anything inappropriate or saying anything inappropriate or anything. Watching, I guess, one of the things certainly I've been accused of is they're like, check his hard drive. So having kiddie porn or anything like that. I mean, and by the way, while we're at it, I've been having these conversations about pedophilia a lot. It is on the spectrum of sexuality to be attracted to kids. Unfortunately, that's a thing, and we should not demonize people who are on that can't help that. We definitely should criminalize any sexual assault on a child if you act on it. So I'm attracted to a lot of women. I just try not to make them feel uncomfortable in any way. If I feel attracted towards them, I try to be professional and respectful and not act upon my attraction. My wife and I were talking about this as well. There are 100 ways to make someone feel uncomfortable. You can't deny that you're attracted to someone, though. It's completely normal. And unfortunately, some people are attracted to kids. But as long as you're not acting on that, then it's not a crime. So I don't think I've said anything that's controversial. I don't think I've made any good points. The only thing that's interesting is how these people are attacking me and why. That's interesting. And I'm going to be, I've reached out to a couple experts who cover that kind of beat. And it looks like I'll be interviewing Jared Holt about this kind of behavior on social media. He is a resident fellow at the Atlanta Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab, studying domestic extremism and all this QAnon stuff concerned with pedophilia. And he's someone who can certainly speak to that. And they're coming for me, and I want to try to understand how they organize, because it has been interesting, if it wasn't so scary and upsetting, that they tweet at you like every minute, several people tweeting. It's an organized assault trying to destroy you in several different ways. I don't think it's really working for me, on me, but it's not. I mean, it's definitely working on scaring me and upsetting me to some extent, but it's not affecting my reputation or anything I've done, as far as I can tell so far. And hopefully that'll be remain the case. So I'll talk with Jared about how that works and how we can prevent it if possible, and how to manage it when it does happen tomorrow. But right now, I'm going to share my interview with Dr. Michael Mann with you. He is a longtime guest of mine, regular here on the show at Sirius, and now here on the podcast. He's an author of several books. His most recent book, so good, it's The New Climate War, The Fight to Take Back Our Planet. He is on Twitter at Michael E. Mann. He's a scientist, like I said, an author, distinguished professor of atmospheric science, and director of the Earth System Science Center at Penn State. He's won all kinds of awards, highly respected, and always great to catch up with him. And here we go with Dr. Michael Mann right now. All right, there he is. One of the most respected climate scientists in the whole entire planet joins me now. Welcome back to Stand Up, Dr. Michael Mann. How are you?
I'm doing well, Pete. It's great to be with you.
Just want to mention again, the still new book, I have to say, very, very relevant, super important, as is all of your work. The New Climate War, the fight to take back our planet. It is not getting enough attention. Not the book, the subject. I know there's a lot happening in the world. I realize that. But this is part of every single other issue that we talk about. My feeling is that climate is not getting enough attention. We can talk about why, but last week you were talking about and promoting that there were congressional hearings. Our friend Bill Nye was, of course, testifying, as well as others. Republicans got to choose a couple people, apparently, who didn't mention the word climate. But even that hearing, I feel like, didn't get enough attention. What is your feeling about how much attention the most important crisis of our time is or is not getting?
Yeah, thanks. It's well put. I mean, it is the greatest challenge we face. And so, we should be talking about this on a daily basis. And I do think that the media is doing a little better of a job, the mainstream media, a little better job now covering this, in part just because it has become so prominent in, our consciousness. We're living through the impacts of climate change. Now, it was eclipsed to some extent by, an even more acute crisis, the pandemic. And as we come out of that, I expect that, there will be an opportunity to connect the dots. Look, we made it through this crisis, but we've got an even greater crisis that's looming, and we haven't done nearly enough. The G7 meeting this last week brought the issue of climate change to the fore. There was some discussion about what the industrial nations of the world need to provide to the developing world, financing, ways of making sure that they don't make the same mistake that we made. So there was a little bit of a discussion around that, and that was good to see. But you're right. I mean, there isn't nearly enough discussion of this given the prominence. And look, the House of Representatives, that committee, brought in Bill Nye, and Bill's a good friend and he's a great communicator, but he's a public figure. And so to some extent, it was a gambit on their part. What do we need to do to bring attention to this issue? Do we need to bring in Bill Nye, the science guy?
Sometimes they do. Like I've always argued for well-known celebrities who aren't necessarily experts or scientists, because I don't want to die on that hill. Like, bring attention. I forget the Asian actor, but at the height of this, violence against Asian people during the pandemic, Daniel, I think his name, he's on Lost. I forget his name, but he gave like a 6-minute testimony on the record to Congress. It was brilliant. Maybe, in this case, if Michael Mann writes it for me and I say it, we still win. So I feel like I'm okay with that if that's what it takes sometimes, a certain star power. But it still didn't seem to get that much attention last week, his congressional testimony or that hearing itself. What did come out of that? What was that congressional hearing for? And what, if anything, do you think good came out of it?
Yeah, so it was really, the meeting was about disaster preparedness, and and specifically, the hearing was about climate change and the risk that it represents to us when it comes to disasters and mitigating the impacts of disasters, weather disasters, climate disasters. And what was ironic was that the ranking member, that is the minority, is now the Republicans. The Democrats control the House of Representatives, and they control the agenda of these hearings to some extent. And that's why climate change was in the actual title of the name of the hearing. But the ranking member, the Republican, didn't mention climate change once in her opening statement. And the Republicans got one witness. I believe the Democrats got 3. And that witness also didn't say anything about climate change in their opening statement. And to some extent, it's sort of, it speaks to the premise of the new climate war, which is that we've moved away from outright denial of climate change. It's just not credible. But that doesn't mean that the forces of inaction have given up. They have used all of the tactics that they can to distract us, to deflect attention away from the needed solutions, to divide us, to do anything they can to prevent us from taking action. And here at that hearing, the Republicans wanted to talk about adaptation. They wanted to talk about resilience. but they wouldn't address the gorilla in the room, which is climate change, because no amount of adaptation or increased resilience is going to protect us from the impacts of climate change if we don't act. So that's one of the tactics, is to pretend like you're talking about the problem and you're talking about solutions, but the solutions that you're offering aren't real solutions.
There have been some major wins, and we can give credit to activists and grassroots organizations over the past few weeks. The ending, the canceling of the Keystone Pipeline, the protests on Line 3, and we'll see what happens, obviously, with that. But I don't know why.
The ExxonMobil, the board,
Yeah, that's a huge. We should talk about that a little bit. But for years, activists have been trying to get a seat at the table as shareholders, so that they could at least attend shareholder meetings and raise questions. And that effort has gone on for long enough where somehow, and tell me if I've got this right, they got board seats. And
three of them.
At Exxon, or was it Chevron? I forget which one, but basically the type of influence they can now have. Not to mention the other huge triumph seems to be the divestment movement as well, and certain major institutions or even entire cities, I think, like New York, divesting taking all their investments out of dirty fossil fuels. So the wins are coming, and they are major, and they are as a result of, I think, activism. What do you say about the wins that we've seen?
Yeah, and let's recognize that they are the results of decades of activism. Let's give credit where it's due, because sometimes there's a delay between the activism and the actions that are taken, and the dividends that they ultimately provide. And here, there has for years been efforts. Bill McKibben, 350.org, sort of led the climate divestment movement, which began more than a decade ago. And finally, we've gotten to the point where all of that pressure has led investment banks and finance, sort of the finance community, to say, we're going to stop funding new fossil fuel infrastructure. The G7, the major industrial economies of the world, have put out a statement actually before the recent G7 meeting, saying that they have agreed, the countries of the G7 have agreed not to provide financing for new coal infrastructure. There are a number of accumulating wins here, and so it's, in a sense, it's an arms race, because we're making real progress and we're peaking those carbon emissions. They're starting to come down. Those efforts are paying off as well. We're really starting to transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy in a meaningful way. And we've seen some bold commitments by the U.S. and by the UK and others going into this next climate conference, the COP26 meeting later in this year in Glasgow. The countries of the world are sort of coming to the table, recognizing that there's a crisis, and starting to put meaningful policies on the table. But we're up against a fairly unforgiving sort of, predicament, which is that we need to bring our carbon emissions down by a factor of 2 within a decade. That's a massive change if we are to avert catastrophic warming of more than 1.5 Celsius, 3 degree Fahrenheit warming of the planet. So there's still time to do that. We're making some progress, but we're going to have to make even more progress. And we're going to have to transition away from fossil fuels even faster if we have any hope of averting catastrophic climate impacts.
All right. So I was very optimistic, but let me throw out my pessimism now. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere hits record height despite pandemic dip is one headline. And here's another headline. This is from Switzerland. The Swiss reject tax hike to cut emissions and synthetic pesticide ban. And then let me just throw this one in there. Did you see the president of France, Macron, get slapped in the face?
I did not see that.
Did you hear about it? You got to watch.
I'm sure there are several reasons that he deserved it, but
apparently I read today, because I always get curious about why people do things. Why would you say this guy was upset about that Macron wanted to raise the gas tax, and about the protests that occurred there, And then I heard, David Attenborough, with this optimistic tone, like, we have to come together. We can do this type of thing. And yet we can't even wear masks to protect each other. We, in a lot of polling, won't allow there to be like a 10-cent, if even they raise 10 cents to help fight climate change. A certain majority of people, not just Americans, obviously, I mentioned the Swiss and other countries, France, would reject that. It seems like we have to solve this problem together. And it seems like we have to make, some people would call it a sacrifice, although I wouldn't. But pay a little bit more. Or more importantly, Michael, we have to be together on this. We have to work together on this. And I guess I've become a little bit more pessimistic because it seems like we haven't been able to work together to save each other's lives due to, a virus that we were watching killing people. So it's harder on this issue, which plays out a little bit slower. Maybe you'll talk me down. Maybe you'll add to it.
No, you've convinced me. We're screwed. No.
Thank you for joining me again. I will talk to you soon.
No, we are up against a monumental challenge. Let's face that. Let's, not be Pollyannish about this. And there are some things that are happening that are troubling. What we've seen, I would argue right now in our public discourse, is the metastasization of what was once a local cancer. Basically the war on climate action, which began decades ago, the efforts to attack scientists, attack science, and vilify us, distort the public understanding. All of that, was playing out over several decades when it comes to the fossil fuel industry and the battle to avert catastrophic climate change. And what we've now seen, as I alluded to, is the metastasization of that into our entire body politic. And the current campaign of vilification against Anthony Fauci, simply the messenger, because, what he's saying about the need to vaccinate, the social distancing measures that he advocated and others in the public health community advocated for, because that conflicted with the near-term political agenda of the Republican Party and Donald Trump in particular, the entire party became a weapon of anti-science, and focused on, again, a key individual, Anthony Fauci, which is one of their modus operandi, is to try to take one person, make an example of them, and make that a warning for others who would consider stepping up. So, yes.
But that was done. That was what's happened to Fauci has happened to you throughout your career, maybe on a smaller scale, but not that much smaller. You've been attacked and being threatened because you're a scientist and you've been talking about science forever. You've written about it. You've talked about it openly, and now you're seeing it happen to epidemiologists, virologists, and so on.
Yeah, no. In fact, earlier this year, I wrote a op-ed for Newsweek, the title of which was "Anthony Fauci: We Climate Scientists Feel Your Pain." Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that. Oh, yeah. Of course,
we've been there. We've seen it before. We've had the same, tactics deployed against us by bad actors, by special interests, whether it be the fossil fuel industry, or those that are now advocating for the Republican Party and its agenda. So we're up against these monumental challenges, and some of them are so fundamental, right? The implication here is that in order to make progress when it comes to public health, when it comes to climate change, we are going to need to find a way to fight back against this, this Leviathan, which is the current day Republican Party and its willingness to promote anti-scientific messaging when it suits their agenda, when it suits the short-term interests of the major players in the party, even though it basically puts the entire population at risk. And there's no greater example than climate change, because far more people will die if we fail to act on the climate crisis than died because of the failures of the Republican Party and the Trump administration to act properly on the COVID-19 crisis. So we are, and this is really the message of my book, we haven't won this battle. It's evolved from the old climate war, which was the attack on the basic science, to the new climate war, which is still an attack on efforts to do something about the climate crisis, fought by the same mainstream players, the fossil fuel industry, conservative politicians, conservative media outlets that advocate for them. So we are still in a war, not of our own choosing, but we have to recognize that. We have to recognize the obstacles, and we have to fight back, and we have to win this because the stakes couldn't be greater. We're literally talking about the future of this planet.
What do you think? I forget if we talked before the election or just after, but a lot has changed, obviously, and we knew this with the Biden administration versus Trump administration when it comes to everything regarding the environment, climate, and just understanding science, obviously. But where do you think that the Biden administration and Democrats are at? Because it seems they're a bit adrift. It seems like the reality of what we need to get done in terms of major legislation because of the filibuster, because of our politics and media and so on. It seems like they're pulling back a little bit. They're compromising a bit too much on certain things. We have a kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity to go really, really big. And everybody is talking about infrastructure as certainly as it relates to serious people, as it relates to sustainability and rebuild America, build back America better, whatever their slogan is, but make it more sustainable. This is an obvious thing to do. We have to do it now, but we don't have enough numbers politically, it would seem, to get what we need so badly to get done, which would create millions of jobs. But I'm just being general here. Where do you think we are at? Where do you think the Biden administration, Democrats, and the activists that are pushing them are at in terms of going big and actually making a big difference when it comes to the sustainability and solutions that we need for renewable energy and more?
Yeah, it reminds me of the old saying, I'm not a member of any organized party. I'm a member of the Democratic Party. And, they don't seem to be as organized tactically as Republicans. And that's historically been a problem.
But I got to push back on that. You're right. It's a problem, but it's easier for Republicans because they're all the fucking same people. It's the same, like Democrats have so much diversity of people, of culture, of opinion. So it's much harder for Democrats to kind of come together on a message than it is than Republicans who are overwhelmingly, say, Christian and white and toxic masculinity and all the bullshit that comes with it. That's easier to message. So I just wanted to throw in that caveat.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And there are also been some, studies of sort of the almost the brain organization of conservatives versus progressives.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
And they're much more likely to sign on to sort of an authoritarian, disciplinarian agenda, which is the Republican agenda. So there's always been a fundamental asymmetry in these battles, which is that one side wants to tear things down, the other side wants to build things, and it's much easier to tear things down than to build them. That's the struggle that we really face here in addressing all of these crises, including the climate crisis. So in a sense, we're sort of battling with one hand tied behind our back. At the same time, we have truth on our side. I would argue, today, this has become, and I don't say this lightly, it is a battle between good and evil. The Republican Party has come to stand for almost a Tolkien-esque evil. And that's the sort of battle that we're in. We're in a battle to preserve this planet with those who would happily destroy it for their own narrow interests. And there's asymmetry there. We have to recognize that. And that having been said, as I think you and I would both agree, Democrats could be more effective in their messaging. They could certainly show a little bit more fight. And I think that's what Democrats want to see from their representatives right now. They want to see some real fight because, again, the stakes couldn't be any greater. If not for this, if we're not willing to fight now for, the preservation of our democracy and the preservation of our planet, then what are we? What are we waiting for? What are Democrats waiting for, if not willing to fight for that?
Well, you mentioned, having truth on your side is a good feeling, and it often helps you win arguments in life, much less policy arguments. But it would seem the more realistic thing that we need on our side is affordability and efficiency of solutions that we have to implement to slow the climate crisis down. And when it comes to batteries and energy, and even if policy makers weren't at odds with each other, it feels like we're still not where we need to be technologically to get to where we need to be. You write about this, of course, and have a lot of time. So where are we in terms of, and that's the other thing, like I said earlier, people don't want to make a sacrifice, but I was with a whole bunch of my buddies over the weekend, and some of my redneck, conservative guys were just touting they can't wait to get their electric pickup. So I was like, oh, this is good. Yeah. This is good. They don't have their sexuality tied to the source of fuel or their ego, whatever. They were excited about that. These vehicles are more powerful. And he was saying they just need to go longer because people, be able to drive longer. But we're almost there. Where are we in terms of the question of affordability and efficiency? Because that's what you need Americans and citizens of other countries to have. Even though they do public transportation better in a lot of the world, we need all of that in America if we're actually going to buy into it.
Yeah, I mean, we're there. That's the irony. We're at the point where renewable energy on a levelized basis is actually cheaper than fossil fuel energy. It's cheaper than nuclear energy. Now, there are all sorts of subsidies, direct and indirect, that are being provided to the fossil fuel industry. Cheap leases, you name it. Various governmental policies that are basically that assist them directly. So they have this unfair advantage. Where you've got this fossil fuel energy, which is destroying the planet, or continued dependence on it is destroying the planet, and there should be a cost. You shouldn't be able to dump your pollution into the atmosphere for free, and yet currently in our perverted incentive system, we're actually providing the incentives to the form of energy that's damaging us and our planet, and so. It isn't the technology. We have the technology to solve this problem in the form of renewable energy. And on a levelized basis, as I said, it's already cheaper. But what we don't have is the leadership in Washington, D.C. We don't have meaningful policies to complement, what the administration is doing. The Biden administration is doing a lot of good things. And I've pointed out, the importance of the executive actions that we're seeing under this administration, the restored leadership that the U.S. is now providing. That's all good, but we need legislation that'll codify these changes, that'll help us, speed up that transition. Because just as you say, look, there are a lot of us who will do the right thing. We'll even pay extra for an electric vehicle or, renewable energy because we know it's the right thing to do. But we have to make it easy for those who might not have the same views we have about the environment, who might not care about the climate in the same way. We have to make it easy for them to make the right decisions. The economic incentives have to be such that they're led to make climate-friendly and environmentally friendly decisions, whether or not they're even thinking about it because of the market forces that are pushing them in that direction. And what we need for that is leadership in Washington, D.C. We need climate policy. As you know, right now, that is held back potentially by one or two Democrats, including Joe Manchin. And the real battle will be to win over a coal state Democrat like Joe Manchin to be willing to pass under reconciliation meaningful climate action as part of this, currently debated infrastructure plan, but follow-up legislation as well.
Have you ever looked into that state, West Virginia? I mean, how many coal jobs they have left, and how influential that lobby is? I mean, I've been saying to everybody I can, my argument is give Joe Manchin whatever he wants, whatever. Give him as much, give him money, give him a house, give all of the people in West Virginia income for the year or something. But is there anything? Have you ever looked at West Virginia, where it's at, and why the politics are still kind of stuck in coal when in fact they would all be doing better with investments in other energy or other types of jobs? Is there anything we can do to coax that guy into voting for the right type of policies to affect the climate crisis?
Yeah, let's recognize that, the coal industry has gone down a death spiral over the past 4 or 5 years. That was under Donald Trump's watch. Was that due to
He tried his best to save it. He tried his best to save it.
Did it go down because of his war on coal? No, it went down because market forces just aren't in favor of. That's an outdated, antiquated technology. It's not competitive with the cleaner energy technologies that we have today. And so, we have to recognize that. And a lot of jobs have been lost. I actually did an event a couple years ago in Charleston, West Virginia, and that's sort of the heart of West Virginia. Coal. A lot of people. I stayed, there for a couple days and sort of got a sense of that community. A lot of down and out folks who are out of job. They've fallen victim to, the opiate crisis. It's just a real mess. And what they need, and we know what's happened as the coal industry has undergone a death spiral, and there are no longer, jobs. It's a largely automated industry anyways. So there really weren't that many jobs, and the jobs that there were have largely disappeared. And so you have, the children of coal families that, if they can, they move away. They get out of there. And what's left behind becomes an older, more conservative, and frankly, whiter population. And that's why, West Virginia, I think, has trended so dramatically towards becoming a deep red state, when just a couple decades ago, it was a purple state at worst and arguably even a blue state. And that's because the demographics have changed. We need to help those people out. We need policies that are going to provide jobs. That's one of the things that the Biden administration is trying to do with their executive actions, to provide resources, to provide jobs to people in those communities, to clean up brownfields and plug up old coal mines, and put them to work actually fixing the problem that was created by more than a century of dirty fossil fuel extraction. So that's what we need to do. The Biden administration is trying to do that through executive actions, but we need, once again, legislation. And right now, Republicans have shown no willingness to work together with Democrats to advance meaningful legislation.
What about the rest of the world? Final question, where we kind of started, where you've been talking about this week. You mentioned the G7. How is the rest of the world doing? For 4 years, they had the lead on this. It seems like we're back in the lead on this, hopefully. But, we need the rest of the world. It's not wrong when people make the argument that if China doesn't go along with our goals, then we can't do it alone, because the atmosphere is all of ours. But what would you say about the rest of the world, including China, not to mention the G7 countries or Australia, where you went for a couple of months last year?
Yeah. And so, what we saw was under Donald Trump, who had threatened to pull out of the Paris Accord, we saw China ease up in their own efforts, because China really was on board under a bilateral agreement with the Obama administration that laid the groundwork for the Paris Agreement. China was really starting to get their act together. Then Trump came in. That took the pressure off them, and they started to build coal-fired power plants again. Well, now, once again, new administration, the Biden administration, they've come to the table. The U.S. and China have now agreed to make meaningful pledges, and the U.S. has already put a pretty good pledge on the table going into the Glasgow Climate Conference later this year. So China's back at the table, in part because the U.S. is taking leadership once again, and that's brought a lot of the intransigent actors back to the table. But we do have some holdouts, and you mentioned Australia. In the industrial world, they are almost unique in their obstinance right now, and I don't blame the Australian people. I spent a sabbatical down there last year, got to know Australians. I really like the people, and I think they really get it. We all lived through. I lived through the Black Summer with them. This
you
summer
were in Australia during those fires. I remember that because my buddies down there, and I talk to them every day, basically. And I remember you were down there at the same time during those horrific fires that we saw these apocalyptic images coming out of. I
could see and smell the smoke from my apartment in Sydney. It was profound. And any of us who lived through that, understood. To me, it was the first time I felt that I had really come face to face in such a profound way with the impacts of climate change. And so the Australian people are on the right side of this. They want leadership from their politicians. But right now, the current coalition, the Conservative government under Scott Morrison has shown no willingness to make any meaningful effort to act on the climate crisis. They'll probably have another election next year. And I hope the people boot him out and vote in, a prime minister who's willing to actually do something.
I don't think Vladimir Putin seems to be on board with anything.
No, this is the coalition of the unwilling, as I call them. Mm-hmm. And who are they? They're Russia, they're Saudi Arabia. They were us under Trump, but now we're back in, back on the good side. And Australia under, Prime Minister Morrison. There's a lot of pressure on Australia right now, being brought to bear by the G7, by the bold plans from other countries. And so we have to continue to levy that pressure and potentially force their hand.
One comment, just want to see if you agree with this, but a French climate negotiator named Laurence Toubiana who's a key actor in the triumphant Paris Climate Conference in 2015, said of what's come out of the G7, in the face of a perfect storm of planetary crises, the world's richest democracies have responded with a plan to make a plan. Do you agree with that framing of it?
Yeah, in a sense, I'm a little more sort of optimistic and a little more supportive of what, the legacy of the Paris Agreement really is. It's a foot in the door. And so, it's certainly the case. And I agree with the sentiment that the current commitments alone aren't enough to get us where we need to go. They don't decarbonize our global civilization as fast as we need to. And so that's why there needs to be a lot of pressure on the nations of the world to really ratchet up their commitments. And the U.S. has put a bold pledge, cutting carbon emissions by 50% within the next decade, which is what we need to do writ large. We've seen the UK under Boris Johnson actually put forward a very bold pledge. The EU, China is back in the game. So we're seeing action. But look, we have to continue to put pressure on our policymakers because we know the fossil fuel industry is putting a huge amount of pressure on them. And if we're not providing equal and opposite pressure towards climate action, we know who's going to win out, the polluters, and we know who's going to lose out. It's us and our planet.
Dr. Michael Mann, the newest book, get all of his books, but his newest book is The New Climate War, The Fight to Take Back Our Planet. Go buy all of them now. Follow him on Twitter. Always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. Thanks so much for allowing me to catch up with you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to talk with you, my friend.
Yeah, Michael Mann. How about that? Oh, so good. That book is so great. You should definitely get Michael's book and follow him on Twitter and let him know that you heard him here on the program. And he's on Twitter, by the way, at Michael E. Mann, M-A-N-N. The book is The New Climate War. It shows how fossil fuel companies have waged a 30-year campaign to deflect blame and responsibility and delay action on climate change. He also offers a battle plan for how we can save the planet, and it is so good. Love it. Love him. Great guy. Really great guy. Okay. I'm really happy with this next interview. It was great. I learned a lot. I love talking to him. We had some great laughs. He's a hilarious comedian who's really done great work during the pandemic, making sketches. A lot of comedians have just tried to adapt to new technology, as well as not being able to go out and entertain live audience. And Corey Forrester has done a great job at it. And he's on the Well-Read Comedy Tour. I'll be talking with his friend Trey Crowder, who's also on that tour in the next couple of days. But right now, my conversation with Corey Forrester. But before that, I want to play a sketch that he made making fun of Marjorie Taylor. It's so great. She is actually his congressman. Corey Forrester lives in Georgia in her district. And this is the sketch he made to make fun of her apology about her anti-Semitism after visiting the Holocaust Museum. Here's comedian Corey Forrester playing a conservative congressman apologizing for Holocaust remarks.
Hello, and thank you for joining me here today. As your congressman, I would like to apologize for the horrible, horrible things that I said about the Holocaust. Didn't know that was a real thing. I ain't gonna lie to you. In my defense, 6 million, that's a lot. That's like how many people watch MASH. While we're getting things off our chest, I didn't know who Martin Luther King Jr. was, all right? Thought he was the guy who invented boulevards. I would also like to apologize for saying that the AIDS epidemic was just another one of God's little whoopsie-diddlies, I believe is the term I used. Look, I don't know what to tell y'all, all right? I'm a conservative. We don't like to dwell on things that happened in the past. You hear me? We're a party that likes to move forward. So yes, I apologize for everything I said, but can we please keep our focus on the future? All right? Now, for the real reason I called you here today, conserving and protecting our Confederate statues.
Yes, very funny. Corey Ryan Forrester. And shortly after the insurrection, back in early January, Corey also reacted to the Capitol riots, as it was then called, and it went absolutely viral, went crazy. CNN interviewed him, but here is this. You probably saw this. So many people watched it. You probably did. But if not, this will remind you.
I hope you're fucking happy and sad, you fucking little piss pants pieces of shit. Oh, we're going to storm the Capitol. Let's storm the Capitol. We're patriots. You're a fucking coward. Patriots. Jesus Christ. Fucking idiots that I played high school football with wearing a goddamn American flag bandana talking about, we got to get up there and storm. We got to take our country back. From what? From fucking what? What are you so goddamn upset about? What has anyone ever done to you? You fucking entitled piece of shit. Don't you ever fucking call me one again. Don't you ever say, Corey, you fucking snowflake. You're a liberal. That means that y'all look. What? Want some people to not be sick every now and then? Is this the thing that you can't fucking stand? So you've got to get in your goddamn fucking piece of shit Ford F-150 you got from your dad, drive it to D.C. and pitch a fucking fit? Is that what it is? Is it health care? Is it still with the fucking guns? Is that what is it? You said Obama was taking them. 8 fucking years ago you said that. Nothing. What is it that this country hasn't fucking given you? You literally got escorted out of the Capitol building aside from the ones that they had to fucking shoot. Is that what it takes? Did you just want to be a fucking martyr? God, you're so fucking pathetic. Do you not ever just sit there and think, my kids are going to see this. My grandkids are going to see this. They're going to put it in the textbook, and you're going to look like the dumbest motherfucker in the world. Nobody will give a shit about Watergate. Nobody. That is fucking... Dude, I'm out of breath from how stupid y'all are. What is it that this country doesn't give you that you think you have to do some bullshit like this? But when you see a fucking black person actually get shot... No gun in their hands, nothing. Oh, they should just comply. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. What is your goddamn problem? Just quit embarrassing me, man. I want my fucking country back. How about that? God damn it. Fuck y'all, you fucking cowards.
Woo-wee. And here he is now, ladies and gentlemen, the buttercream dream himself, Corey Ryan Forrester. Welcome to the show. Hey, man, great to see you in this format.
Yeah, good to see you again, Pete. How are you?
I'm good, and a lot of your rants and videos and podcasts are things that help me get through the pandemic. I love what you guys are doing. Just reached out to Trey to get him on and as well, and I just thank you for all of your comedy and levity and analysis on everything that's happened in the world. It's super helpful, really.
Well, thank you. It literally took a pandemic for me to realize that was like even a, I guess, skill set that I have.
Were you not making these types of videos and sketches, or you were just doing straight stand-up?
Dude, not only was I not doing it, I'm ashamed to even say this. I was like, not against it, because I mean, that's how Trey blew up. But like Trey, I saw what Trey went through with Trey had been doing straight stand-up. And then he made a video and it blew up. And I watched people be like, oh, yeah, here's this YouTube guy, you know, and I saw it. He was just like, you know, whatever puts the butts in the seats, I don't care. But I really wish people would understand, like, I'm a stand-up comedian. I've been doing stand-up. I'm not a YouTube guy who started doing stand-up because he wanted to sell some tickets. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But I think it put like a chip on my shoulder where I was like, well, I'm on this tour with Trey. He's the one that did the video thing. I don't have to do that. What I like to do is stand up. We've got a network deal. I don't have to do the videos. Like, dude, when we would be out on the road, our manager would have to pull our teeth to be like, hey, if you could put up a video to promote your dates, that'd be great. And I'd be like, well, luckily for a lot of the run, especially our early run, was like, but they're already sold out. Why would I do that? Like, why just to brag? I mean, I can do that. But like, it never crossed my mind to do any of that shit. I was like, everything I did was for the stage. And then, the pandemic happened, and it took about a couple of weeks before I was just bored. I mean, creatively, I was like, I got to do something. And then it got to like, oh man, what if this lasts a long fucking time? Like, this is your, you didn't go to college, dude. Now, you don't know how to do anything else.
Yeah. So what is your family situation? You're married, aren't you? You have a kid?
Married, no kid.
Oh, okay.
Married, no kid. Right. So I can fail as many times as I need to. You know what I mean? Like, I'm okay.
How long have you been married?
Not 4 years. We've been together for 5 years. We just celebrated our 2-year anniversary last week.
So that's another just a question about your time and how you spent this past year. But I'm glad whatever it took. The fact that you're making videos, I hope you never stop. They are very cathartic in a way. I mean, how do you live? First of all, the fact that you live in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district sadly makes you that much more interesting. But I want to talk about that. But are you also bored with talking about why you guys have had a lot of success? Because I think it might be boring for you to talk about, but it's not for me. Like, I think that what you guys have done has been really, really great, and there's a real good reason that you guys have gotten a lot of success and a lot of popularity. And I'm wondering if you're kind of bored about even having to be asked about that.
Pete, I never get bored of talking about myself or telling myself.
Same.
And I don't. And I mean, for me, like, I've heard Trey have to do this a lot. Like, we call it hey, have we done this show before? Or are you going to have to do the origin story? You know what I mean? It was that. And I saw him do it a lot, but I'm still in the, like, I'm so happy right now that it's like, oh, they're asking me, not, hey, Trey's buddy, you talk whenever he's done, and so, like, I'm fine with it. And I do think it's important. Like, you're right. And what you're alluding to is the fact that I sound like how I sound, am from Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, but hate her and hope she gets swallowed by a whale.
Also, you look like that. I think let's not let you dress
for sure.
A certain way, man. Although I do feel like your beard is a little too well maintained. Like, I feel like you need to let it go and be a little messier to play up certain roles that you're embodying. I don't know. I don't want to tell you how to wear your face, but it looks too neat.
I agree with you. It's just I learned a couple years ago that, hey, buddy, you're never going to have a jawline because that's not how God built you. But you can fake one with, like, the mutton chops thing. So, like, this is like when I shave even though, like, the beard technically, like, if it's a couple inches long, that adds fuller to my face. But when I shave you've seen this
your head. The head is very, although it does look like you lost a little weight in the head. Are you
I'm losing a little head weight. I didn't think it was possible. Started from the absolute top, and now we're here, I guess. But I've lost like 38 pounds since October.
Wow.
But then I gained 15 2 weeks ago, and then lost 10 last week back from it. I'm a yo-yo guy.
Have you always been like that, up and down, 15, 20 pounds? You have?
Pretty much. Now, like, I've only I've lost 38 pounds on the dot twice in my life. But I'm healthier now than I've ever been. Like, I don't think I'm going back up all that now, because now that I'm a video guy and I see myself too much. And, I mean, people would always, like, it's not like I wouldn't be on the road and people would be like, well, boy, I'll tell you what, you sure are round, like that happened. But now that it's the internet, like, I see it all the time. So I'm, like, way more self-conscious, and, like, so I'm drinking less. I'm walking a lot more. I'm eating healthier. So the 15 pounds I gained 2 weeks ago was literally just because I was at the beach and I could not stop eating po' boys. So
how many would you honestly say that you had? Like,
we were there for 7 days. I had 6 po' boys, and I know for a fact I counted 20 dozen oysters. I don't know how much I actually had.
Are those high in calories shellfish like that if you eat a bunch of them?
Yeah, I think not like carbs. Like, it's like this past week I lost 10 pounds. All I ate was oysters, but I didn't have none of the bread from the po' boy, and I didn't drink alcohol. That was huge because the week before that it was just boozing every day. That's where I get in trouble.
You can turn alcohol on and off pretty easily?
Oh yeah, I always have been. I'm a binge guy. Like, I'm not there's nothing that I have to do every day, but sometimes there's a week where I do. Like this week I'm really into, but like sometimes it's healthy things. Like, man, I'm really into waking up and having a clementine orange every day for a week. And then sometimes it's like if one of my favorite bands.
I love that you said clementine orange. Like, we didn't know if you had left orange off. It was almost like you were that confident about eating that you had to like give it the second part of it. Just to be clear, this is a piece of fruit, clementine orange fruit.
I did in my mind, because I'm always talking to the lowest common denominator. So I just so you know, that's an orange.
I want you to know you're talking to a guy who knows most fruits.
No,
most
not
fruits.
You. I
know. You meant.
Yeah.
So you don't have to. You can code switch back.
You got it. But so, like if one of my favorite bands, I don't know what it is, I did 4 months sober during the pandemic, and I quit nicotine. So like, I'm clearly capable of being a better person than people. But like, also, I had my buddies over at American Aquarium put out a new album, and it was a 90s country album. And I spent 4 days drunk listening to the album, because that's a trigger for me. Like, 90s country music is a trigger. And I spent 4 days just getting hammered, because but then I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to drink for 2 months, and then I'll do it.
That is, I think, fairly unique and hard to do. I went a month without drinking. I don't drink very much, but I have a drink most nights, or two sometimes. And a month was really interestingly challenging for me. What's your relationship with the weed? Because I'm a big weed person.
Gummies, because I know exactly what I'm getting, and it's taken me it's taken me sincerely 4 years of, okay, this brand, this amount. Okay, no, that one didn't work. This brand, and I finally got it, and now my relationship with weed is so great. And I think that's why I don't booze as much anymore. Sure. Because like, I know, I'm like, here, what type of night do you want to have? Cut it in fourths. You know what I mean? Cut it in fourths.
So how often do you do that? Every night?
Yeah, pretty much every night. I'm like a during the day just CBD guy. Oh yeah, because I've really gotten into it, and then at night I'll have like not too late at night.
Also edibles with the CBD.
Also edibles. Mm-hmm. Yes, dude. Look at me. I like gummies in any form.
You put them in a shrimp sandwich usually.
Yeah, yeah, with my Flintstone vitamins. Just make it a whole thing. But yeah, like I can do that now, and I've got a lot healthier relationship with it. Now, when we go back on the road, I have a feeling that I know what's going to happen. Can I ask you a question, Pete? Does that work?
Anything you want, yeah.
You said you have like a couple drinks a night from time to time?
Lately, not as much. Lately, because I've had a cold, and I just don't usually not in the mood to have alcohol. But yeah. Generally speaking, a drink a night, and then a couple drinks, and then maybe a few on the weekend. Rarely. How
do you look so good?
Oh, well, it's funny you say that. It's seriously like I just have really good metabolism because you like I don't eat, and I don't eat a lot. I'll say that. I usually fast up until 3. Like fast is such a shitty word. Who am I? My wife actually uses that word. That's what I'm thinking of it. But I usually don't eat until like in the afternoon, and then I usually have like one meal a day. And I think probably, and I also have a weird relationship with food in that I don't. I feel like
you used to be fat?
No. I've always been really small and really skinny and fit and slim. But
God damn it.
It's super bold. But I don't. I feel like food. This is kind of like sounds weird. It slows me down. It's interrupting my day. I don't appreciate eating. I've gotten better at appreciating food and appreciating eating and making my own. I definitely have gotten better, but I still am kind of like no time for that. Got to work. It's
I'm with you on that. And the type of work we do. I've heard early on when I was doing stand up, like, I don't remember who it was, but some like comic who I'm sure is dead now because they were older and a lunatic in Chattanooga. And they were just like, you can't eat, kid. Psychologically, what you have to understand is the cavemen. All right. So when cavemen, when you're hungry, all right, that means that your brain is working overtime because your brain's going, hey, we must eat. We must find something to eat. So it makes you creative. When you're full, you go, well, why the fuck would I do anything? I've already had, I'm full. So if you go on stage full, your creative juices aren't going to be flowing. And that always stuck with me. And I don't know if it's like a placebo thing, because I know some people that will literally, like I heard Jay Leno's the type that he'll literally have a sandwich hanging out of his mouth as he's walking on stage. And we all know that Jay Leno's a beast, and like you don't want to follow Jay Leno.
Right.
But like to me,
I've never heard that. I've never heard what you just said about the creativity and the food, and that's not what I was implying. I'm more like, it's more like it's. I don't want to stop doing whatever I'm doing to eat, to just sit and eat, which is completely wrong. I think it's very unhealthy. I think I should not work so much. I should relax more, and I should sit and I should be mindful and not even have a phone. Just sit there and eat whatever I'm eating and be present with myself. I think that's how the healthy way to be. But I have this weird thing about productivity. I've always had this gotta keep working thing.
Well, that's why you're so skinny.
Yeah, probably, but also genetics. Really, seriously, like
I'm that way too. But it's just I can have Captain D's on the way to the next thing a lot of times.
Getting back though to the question that I asked you about, we got off track when you were describing kind of the brand, if you will, or how people see you, and you were like, well, because I talk like this and I look like this. But it's what's more specifically, if we hadn't got off track, I guess I would have said something like, yeah, but it's the word, when you say you talk like that, you mean the accent. But the things that are coming out of your mouth are very liberal or progressive ideas and very critical of conservative ideas. So what we do is, of course, we hear someone, we see someone, and we decide now more than ever, see a black person, you probably think they're more likely to be a Democrat or a progressive person or whatever, gay person. You hear a Southern accent like yours, and we assume that they're a big, a fascist, I guess is the new word.
For sure. And I understand people, like, look, as much as that hurts me and as much as I want to go like, what are you talking about? No one of any race or color is the same. I do have to like look back and go, all right, we've earned some of this stuff, because here's the deal. I do that. When I see someone who looks like me and sounds like me being from here, I automatically assume, I bet me and this person don't see eye to eye. So like, I get it. I totally get it. What does bother me is when someone just like flat out like will like refuse to believe it. Like I get the
what do you mean? That people refuse to believe what?
Like they will hear about what I am, and constantly people are like, he's faking that accent. He's not actually from there. He's not a real Southerner. He's not this. And it's like, I get the initial shock of, oh, wow, this is the juxtaposition of this is kind of throwing me. I get that initial shock, but to take it a step further and be like, there's literally no way, because in order to do that, the mental gymnastics you have to go through, you have to literally pretend like when you look at an election map and you see the state of Tennessee, that it says that it went 90% Republican, 10% Democrat, as opposed to the reality, which is 55-45. And when you see 45% of a state that voted for Democrat, you have to go, that's millions of people, not a couple. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And the data can be now more specific. You can look at a county or a city, obviously. And so the question, I guess the most interesting thing is, how did you grow up? How did you get this way to not necessarily be the norm? Like you said, people are monolithic, but you certainly don't think, I would imagine, the way that most of the people in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, and there we go again with I assume that the vast majority of people, because they voted to put her there and because the district's probably drawn that way to help her be there, are pretty far out there because she's the furthest out there. So where did you grow up and how did you come to be the guy that you are and think the way that you think? That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I did grow up here, and yes, I will say that there's plenty of people in her district where I live that do not like her at all.
Sure, good.
But some of those people voted for Trump and just don't like her. And I can't ever decide. I'm like, is it because she went too far, or is it because, they don't mind it when a guy says it? You know what I'm saying? I can't decide. But like the way that the simple answer, the way I boil it down to is genuinely, when I was a kid, the word liberal was the same as it was a cuss word. People would whisper, hey, they're liberal. That's why they act that way. They're a liberal.
It's interesting, not to interrupt you, but just I don't think I heard either. Like, I don't think I heard much politics, but I bet it's more overt in the South than it is where I grew up in upstate New York. I don't know, but that's interesting that you.
It's not. When I was a kid, it's actually. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because when I was a kid growing up in the church, it was there. It didn't really get said a lot politics wise. Now, I was in the Southern Baptist Church around the time that the GOP and the Southern Baptist Convention at large sort of had like a back alley handshake, and they were just like, hey, if we combine our powers. We can help y'all out. You can help us out. But before that, it was like, I remember the preacher at our church, I remember it was during the Clinton-Dole debates and stuff like that. Like from the pulpit, he even said, he's like, hey, look, I'm the preacher and I'm not here to talk. I'm not taking a stance. Y'all do whatever you want. I'm here to preach the word of God. And however that leads you to vote, that's your thing. And I remember even as a kid being like, oh, right on. Like he's separate. Like that, he doesn't do that. He preaches the word of God and then yada, yada. But, I didn't really know what liberal or conservative or Republican or Democrat meant. But everyone in the church still, if you look back in hindsight, they were definitely voting Republican. And here's how it sort of clicked with me when I got a little bit older and I saw what these people were saying. All my cousins are black. All of every cousin that I know is black, and they were at our church one time, and some things were said, and that sort of like shed light on things. And I started all of a sudden, it's like I'm turned on and I'm alive, and I'm hearing things these people say, and it was simply to me was like whatever these people believe, I believe the opposite of that.
Well, that's
simple.
The thing. I think you unlocked it. I had a similar experience. When you say all your cousins are black, what are you talking about?
I'll tell you. I'll describe it to you the way that it was described to me by people in the community. Your aunt made a mistake.
Were they then like, but she could be forgiven? Or
yeah, she could be. But so my aunt had twins and then had another son, and so I had
with a black man. Your aunt's white with a black man.
Yeah, with a black man. And so my three cousins were black. And obviously, I'm not going to sit here and act like we were naive enough to be like, and it wasn't even brought up. Like, of course it was brought up, but they were because we had grandparents that the level of acceptance was like Russian doll. Like it was like great grandparents. Well, they're just going to go ahead and die now because they can't deal with this. Grandparents, they're still our blood. And then down to here, it's like, hey, that's our goddamn family. You know what I'm saying? And so,
I again, don't mean to interrupt you, but this is fascinating to me because, and I can actually top you. My mom's sister, my white aunt, made two mistakes. She married two black men. The first of which she's been married now 4 times. She's in her last marriage. I think she got her life straightened out. She's been with this guy for like 20 years, but I had 2 cousins who are mixed, and so I completely understand what you're saying, and I think you articulate it really well in terms of I'm not going to say I was so sensitive to everything that certainly they experienced, but this idea of having them in your family, and I don't know how much you saw them and how close you to. We didn't see my cousins that often, only a couple.
It was a holiday thing.
Yeah, ours was mostly 2, but certain things did happen, but there was just a sensitivity. Like I would have been real confused if my parents or other people were saying things because I had these family members that I grew up seeing with my eyeballs from the day I was born.
Yeah.
So,
and I never really paid attention to anything. I mean, we were like super young, and the day that it like really opened up for me was right after September 11th. I was in 8th grade, and we were at church, and we brought my cousins were there with us because that was, with holidays, and sometimes we would all go to church. It was probably my grandmother's birthday or something.
Holidays and terrorist attacks. You guys would get together.
It's a special day. We're never going to forget this. I don't know if you guys know, but we're at church, and I remember the pastor was up there, and he had the freaking projection screen behind him. There's 100 people in this church. We don't need this. Like, he could just say the stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah. He could hold up the paper and just be like, "You guys see this shit?" So
no, we're comics who have played to empty rooms. We know specifically. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like he just they couldn't have given that money to the poor. So he's up there, and they've got this video playing, and it was about, all I remember was it was about like the effects of 9/11 and psychologically how it was going to go down. And I don't remember exactly what was said, but I remember it was a black woman. I remember she was a professor. I don't know where, but I remember that being a thing. Like it said, her little chyron said that. And she said she was talking about, the effects of how this is going to affect children psychologically and like how parents need to treat them. I swear to God, as soon as she got done, this is word for word what the preacher said. I'm sitting there, all my black cousins are sitting there, and he goes, he turned it off and he goes, "Now that woman, even though she was black, I agreed with every word she said."
Oh,
he said that shit. And here's the deal. I look, and like my parents are like, "What the fuck?" And I'm looking around, and everybody else in the congregation is just like unfazed. And frankly, if my cousins hadn't been there, I probably wouldn't have even been paying attention. I'd have been under the pew doing something or whatever. But like we all heard, and my mom and dad looked at us and they just go, "Get your stuff." And we're leaving. And we got up and we left. And like that was when it like really crystallized for me. And I never really thought about politics. I was just like, yeah, there's dumb people and some people yada yada. But like obviously in 8th grade, no foreign policy of any kind affects your life. A white kid at least. Right. I'm a white 8th grader. But like I just remember then my ears were just more open to everything that was going on.
That's a fascinating story for a lot of reasons, but mostly because, you know, when it comes to parenting, sometimes it's not what we say, but what we do. Oftentimes it is. And the fact that your parents decided to get up and leave, whether or not they explained why, you knew why, and it was a given. And that's like, you know, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And your parents did not accept that standard. Literally, they left. The only thing I remember with my mixed cousins, who certainly identify now and then as black, was family reunion, or no, my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary and party. And there's all kinds of people there that we didn't know, and family and friends and whoever. And this little kid, we were playing hide and seek with a bunch of kids. And this little kid said he did not want to be on the brown kids team.
Ooh. And
I feel bad for that little kid now because my brother beat the snot out of him for saying that. Like we went after him pretty hard, and I don't think he ended up playing. But like he didn't know, like whatever he was taught, he was young,
right? Exactly.
But it was a fascinating thing to hear. Because I didn't spend that much time with them, so I didn't like know how they moved through the world. And then they ended up coming to my high school my junior year, and then I learned a little bit more. But yeah, it's such a fascinating thing that you're saying that, because you didn't have a choice but to kind of be at least a little bit more open to people that are from a different background because they were in your family. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that, and also I genuinely think a lot of it for like way less like reasons. I'm a super contrarian.
I got to do more of that when I can't think of a word. Just making a noise.
I think so a lot of people like me doing stand-up comedy. There's so many people now that my profile has been raised a little bit, at least. Like all these fucking, dudes will come in my comments and my direct messages, and after they've threatened to kill me and, fondle my wife when I'm dead and all that good shit that they do, they'll be like, it's just bullshit. Like comedy is supposed to buck the system, and you're just going right along with what the libtards in Hollywood wants you to do. And that makes me so mad. And the reason that makes me so mad is like, dog, I started doing stand-up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. That is exactly what the fuck I was doing. You know what I'm saying? Like where I'm from, now that I'm on a more national stage, I hear you. But on my way to get there, I was doing clubs in the South and nobody knew who I was. And so when I go up there and I do a pro gay joke or hey, this law about abortions is fucked up, I was bucking the system. So there was that part of me that was like, hey, comedy is supposed to be contrarian. And where I'm from, what is contrarian? This shit right here. Like I'm going on stage having to figure out, hey, how do I get this very different point across without them whipping my ass? But like, how do I do that? And so like, that's the thing that number one, and Trey said this a lot. Number one is people tell me that I fake my accent. But number two is people saying like, you're supposed to go against the grain as a comedian. And I'm like, dog, I do. Like, because of my accent, that is exactly what I do.
Well, you rail against your own congressperson on national social media.
Right,
like
exactly.
But you also, just real quick, because it irks the shit out of me when anybody, you lost me or that person lost me at, comedy is supposed to be blank. No, the only answer is funny. Like, if you want to speak truth to power and be George Carlin and Bill Hicks, fine. But if you just want to be straight up hilarious, then Brian Regan is the best or something, whatever it is. Like, so comedy is supposed to be funny. And it doesn't mean it's funny to you, but that's what it's supposed to be. And if you want to speak truth to power, that's fine. It's probably harder to do. You lose a segment of your potential audience that might come out and see you. So maybe it's more noble, whatever. But like, there's no rules, right? I mean, I think we probably agree on that.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I actually talked to Kelly Carlin, George's daughter, yesterday.
She's a good friend of mine.
Yesterday,
she's amazing
about that. Mm-hmm. And I was like,
where did you talk to her publicly somewhere? Like, can we hear it?
I did her show.
Great. I want to hear it.
It'll be on Carlin's Corner the first week of July here.
Awesome.
Awesome. So what we were talking, I was like, because I'm a mixture. Like, it is another thing that I'm so thankful that I am. Like, I'm a lot of things. Sometimes I'm just straight up funny. Sometimes I'm wanting to make a point. Sometimes I sing. Sometimes I'll fall down. Sometimes I'll fart. I don't like to be put in some little box, but like I do like the dudes that I idolized growing up were like Carlin and all these people. And so it was always inherent to me. It's like, you make fun of the king, not the serf. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you do. Now,
punching up.
Now, Now, again, like you said, realistically, the only rule is if it's funny. It's just like I hear all these people like, oh, you can't do anything anymore. And I just want to go like, what is it that you're trying to do that you can't? I don't really know. Like, you just want to make fun of mentally handicapped people. Like, that's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing we used to do in 6th grade. You know, like, come on, bro. Like, I don't get it. But again, like you said, it's supposed to be funny. And sometimes if you follow me on social media, I'm certain sometimes people will see something like, well, I don't get it. This isn't funny. And that's what bothers me. Cause like sometimes sometimes it's, hey, this was Corey Forrester, the person, you know, he exists too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like a good mix of it. And I mean, I think your commentary and your perspective and your point of view is, you know, original. We don't have, you know, there just simply aren't a lot of liberal comedians that grew up and live in the South and in this era. And so, you know, that's what I want to get into with you right now. Like, what is it like where you live? What is it like in this new world that used to be liberal versus conservative, but we could still hang out and kind of get along and find common ground. But, you know, I don't want to put experiences or words in your mouth. So how do you deal with the people who, you know, voted for Trump twice, think that he still won, support the insurrection, are overtly now racist and terrified of learning history? I don't know, your words. What's it like? And how often are they in your family? Are they in your community? Are they everywhere? What's it like?
I've had a unique experience throughout Trump's administration and throughout today, which is basically that mostly throughout Trump's administration, I was on the road the whole time. My house was here, but I was on the road. Like, we were doing like 45 weeks a year. And when we weren't on the road, we were like shooting a sketch or coming to New York and doing your show for promo and just hanging out in Sirius or whatever. So like all of my experience with them was through my sister telling me stuff, because I also jumped off of Facebook because I was like, this is where they are and I can't see it. Then I started to realize, like, dude, you're setting yourself up in your own echo chamber. You can't do that. You still got to have an ear to the ground, you know, like, which is why, by the way, like, I maintain my residency here, and it's for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is where I'm from, and I'm not going to have these people kick me out in a sense of like that, you know, just because they're the way they are doesn't mean that I have to move somewhere where people think more like me. I'm gonna stay here, by God. And also it gives me, maybe I'm wrong here, but like I feel more authority to speak on certain subjects because I feel like a lot of them even are like, they're less mad at me than they would be if I wasn't still living here saying this shit.
Well,
like,
that's
I think
the
some
whole
of them,
thing. That's, yeah, I wonder if, let me try to push back on something like when you say, you know, I don't want to be in my echo chamber, I want to kind of still hear the point of view and of these people. I grew up in a pretty rural area in upstate New York, and certainly conservative, Catholic, Christian, like certainly not liberal. And I don't feel like I have to listen to their point of view because I feel like I grew up with it. Like I rarely learn anything. Sometimes I'll hear, you know, a certain type of argument, economic argument or cultural or even philosophical, but rarely. Like I'm not learning anything from that. Because I grew up with it, I feel like I have that perspective, and now I'm just more interested in learning the perspective of people who I don't know, which might be, you know, all kinds of different cultures. You name it. I don't know any Malaysians.
No, and I'm with you on that. Like when I say, whenever I say like, oh, listen to different people's perspective, and whenever other people say like, you need to hear it from both sides, my brain automatically goes, yeah, if one of those sides is that Black lives don't matter, then I don't care about your opinion. You know what I mean? If that's your other, so like, I don't feel it that way, but it is like, because I'm in the satire world a little bit, which by the way, that's new. I like, it's nice to have an ear to the ground here. But dealing with everybody, I think that most people.
But that's for content. That's to react to it for your career.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. It's not so you can understand them. My point is, you understand them.
I understand them.
You are from them. You are them. It's just you had a different experience. Maybe, I mean, anything can change a person. Or a book could change you. A movie, a documentary, but certainly,
for sure,
you know, a life experience can. And most people just often don't get out of that that town, much less the family.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Though is like, yeah, I live here, but like I said, so for the first 4 years, like Trump's administration, I was on the road, and then when I finally, I've lived at home this year, but I sheltered in place. Like I didn't go out. You know, I think what's really happened is like I've got some buddies who are Republican, and we have this understanding of like, look. I think both of us know they're like, if we met today, I wouldn't like you and you wouldn't like me. Like if we met today,
exactly.
But
because
we didn't meet today. We didn't meet today.
Yep.
And that one time that dude was making fun of my sister, you beat the shit out of him. So we share something. And because of that, we're going to sit at this goddamn bar and we're going to talk about how much Florida-Georgia line sucks. And we're not going to bring up anything else. And it's just that nobody's ever said that out loud. Right. You know what I mean? It's just kind of one of them things. But I also have buddies who I haven't talked to in 5 years, and that definitely wasn't my decision. And I know that they're around, and I'm like, oh, they dropped me, which is fine, by the way. There's definitely friends that I've lost, but at the end of the day, it's like I now look at it as like if we lost a friendship over Donald Trump, then that foundation sucked, and you fucking suck too. So I'm fine with it.
I think you just said, but has it happened? Because like it's different for you or me because we're public about all our opinions. We put everything out there for our lives, for our work. That's what we do. Most people don't do that. But because everybody sees Corey come and knows what you think before you even walk in the room because they saw your video a minute ago or because they're familiar with your career. Has anybody dumped you?
Yeah, they have. And here's the deal. Some people that's really surprised me because like this, who I am right now. I mean, don't get me wrong. We all should be different than we were 5 years ago. I think you should grow. I still was considered a liberal human being 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And these people were like, yeah, who cares? You know, you're our buddy. The second I got popular, then it became a problem for them. Like, they're like, yeah, all you do is da-da-da. I was like, dude. The joke that you just heard me do, I was working on it at the Comedy Catch when we were buddies and you were there with me and it didn't bother you then. The reason is because now I speak for them. Like, that's what I believe. Like, now that I'm on CNN talking, they're like, fuck him. Like, he's made it. Before,
they think you sold out? You were gonna, on the values? Like, they think you sold out on
They say that. They say that.
Do they say
know that in their... They'll tell me I sold out. They're like, you sold your soul to fucking Soros and blah, 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 blah. But I know in their heart,
Did you sell your soul to George Soros? Did you? Answer the question.
Really, Pete, you think we'd be having this conversation right now if I had George Soros's money? I mean, I would have texted you back and been like, dude, if you ever want to come out, you can. But like, I'm not doing this shit no more. But like, I know in their heart that they don't believe that because they know that I've been the same guy. What it is that when I was just trying really hard, I didn't matter to them. Like, they were just like, yeah, whatever. He can go to the open mic and say his little bullshit. But now that they're putting me on CNN and they're like, he's making fun of us.
You're having an impact. You're actually impacting and influencing other people. That is the threshold that they can't go across with you.
And it upsets me because like I've done my best and that's not always good enough for sure. But like I really try to avoid saying things like everybody in my hometown or people where I'm from. I always try to at least go some people. And then I always like to remind everybody, go, by the way, you have to understand this is also where I'm from. So it can't be everybody. Right. And usually I always say, like, I don't like racists and homophobes and blah, blah, blah. That way I always have the fallout of like, hey, all I said was I don't like racists and homophobes. If you felt personally attacked by that, then I got something to say to you. You know what I mean? I wasn't talking to you. But I think that they still think that I'm talking about them. And I'm like, guys, I still live here. We go to the same coffee shop, for God's sakes.
And that coffee shop is Starbucks. So what? But I mean, did how much of it? Is there anybody been overt, like I'm done being friends with you, fuck you, or is it more they don't return the calls, you don't get invited to the things?
Oh well, I never call people, so it ain't that. But it's it's just I hear things. I'll just hear flutter, like people say, hey, I talked to so and so the other day, but I'll have like I had a dude that I used to hang out with a lot, like we were buddies, and I knew that he was a little bit more on the conservative side than me. But I was like, well, whatever. But one time I made this is actually, I think this might have been the final straw that got me off of Facebook, because I was like, that's where the real toxic shit is, because those people have known me forever. Like they really know how to comment something evil, because they can bring up some old shit, like some personal stuff. I made literally the entire contention of my post or joke or whatever was that I don't think kids should get shot at school. Like, in no way was I like, we should take away all the guns. It was just like, hey, there was a mass shooting. That shouldn't happen. And this dude commented, he's like, man, you know, the more I read your bullshit, the more I wish that you'd been in that goddamn movie theater in Denver, you piece of shit.
That's kind.
And I'm just like, okay, literally though, dude, in no way, you saw all this and somehow read, he wants to take away the Second Amendment. Yeah. All I said was kids shouldn't get shot in school. And you were like, fuck you, I hope you die.
Well, how do you understand that? How do you explain their opinions now? You grew up with a lot of people that hold these views, and maybe could you give me an example of like race and how they talk about race? People talk about the South in a way that, well, people lived in or grew up in or spent a good amount of time down there have some pretty interesting opinions for those of us who haven't. And I want to hear your point of view on growing up in the South and how race was seen then. We touched on it earlier with your cousins, but how it's seen now, from Barack Obama to Black Lives Matter to Donald Trump. I mean, pick anything you want. How honest are people? How open are they? And what have you heard people say about it? What do they think about it?
I'll preface this by saying this, and obviously you know this, but some people, I understand this is a hard concept to grasp, but the South isn't exactly all one thing. And by that, I don't mean like we're not all racist. What I mean by that is I grew up in an area that was very, very white, but that's a lot of places in the South. There's a huge black population. The reason why may shock you. But in South Georgia, for instance, somebody may have a completely different experience because their school was 50-50 black, white. Mine was not. So because of that, I can only speak to how race was not talked about, really. And it was that, the reason that it's so easy for a lot of people where I'm from, specifically in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, to sit there and go racism is over is because they genuinely, up until camera phones existed in Twitter and 24-hour news, did not actually see it on a daily basis. Now that when an innocent black person gets shot, it goes viral immediately and everyone has access to it. I don't give you that pass to be that ignorant. You should never have to begin with. But like, I can see where some people generally like, what are you talking about? Because they don't see it every day. Sure. Like they just don't. But now you can. But that's what it was. They were just like, we were taught in school. I remember when Martin Luther King would get brought up. Not all our teachers did this, but I remember a couple were just like, I think it's really important before we start talking about Martin Luther King Jr. to mention that he cheated on his wife.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. They're like, so he wasn't all that good. And it's like, what does that have to do with anything? What does that have? My uncle cheated on his wife. He didn't get a statue.
Well, Thomas Jefferson fucked a child over and over and over. So
I'm saying they would go out of their way to criminalize Martin Luther King Jr. before they gave the story to be like, so there might not be there's more of this than meets the eye. But like for the most part, it was just,
and we only know that because the FBI tapped his phone to blackmail him.
Right. And try to get him to kill himself. Yeah. And so, like, I'd fuck another lady, too. So, my days are numbered, Coretta. Basically, here's like a summarized version of my experience in history class for a lot of it was, there was slavery, and you got to understand that Africa wasn't the best place to live. So we brought them over here.
Oh, right. They had it better here. They had it better here.
And then there was a civil war, and that was about states' rights. And we're not going to bring up what their favorite one of them was. And then Abraham Lincoln, who we will right now take credit for him being a Republican, even though that's not the same thing, freed the slaves, and so. Everything was fine for a while, and then they got a little bit mouthy in the 60s, and then we had to, then there was the civil rights. But once we did that, I mean, goddamn, what else do you want? And then here comes this one, wanting us to vote for him. So, that was
that
it.
is a great one-person show right there about your own experience, your point of view, your vantage point from your elders growing up in Georgia. What about like right now? To me, it's interesting because the perspective of the Civil War being taught the way you say it did, and the way I've heard by a lot of schools down south, is somewhat like you said, and it's easy to not talk about because it's history. It doesn't really come up, but we're living through it now vis-a-vis the statues. Like the statues are a really interesting symbol of where people stand on the issue of the Civil War, and it's such an easy thing to me. And yet, Clint Smith's new book is all about all these, Confederate monuments and cemeteries and their history and where they're at now. It's fascinating. But like, how does that come up? And how do people, do you hear people talking about the statues? Because it's such an obvious thing. Take them down, put them in a museum. Don't honor people who did what they did.
Well, not only am I from Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, I'm also from Chickamauga, Georgia, which is famous for the Battle of Chickamauga, the bloodiest 2-day battle in the entire Civil War. So every single day I walk in a park that has statues. What I will say about this particular park, I agree with you. It should be in a museum and all that stuff. What I will say, however, about this particular park and how I'm like, it is different than what I've seen in some Virginia places, is that all the statues depict the battle, and there's equal representation of Union and Confederate. And also there's not a rebel flag to be found, like, at all. It's all like, sincerely, and I'm not trying to be an apologist, because like, I'm with you, like, all that shit should be like I believe that
now the name of this park is the name of this park is False Equivalency Park. Is that
you asshole? But my point is like, it's all very like, every plaque there is like, here's what happened here. The battery was over here, and yada yada yada, and here's the soldiers, and here's who died.
Yeah, no, like, that is almost like a museum.
It is. It's like an outdoor. It's like an outdoor museum. So with that one, I'm like, okay, if they're all like this, I think, because I was talking to my mom about it, and she was like, "Oh, they're going to take all these statues down one day." And I was like, "I don't know, Mom. There does seem to be a little bit of nuance here that I think that some people are missing." I was like, "I think that if you see these, because it's in a park, which is but when you're down, like when you go to some places in Virginia, the statues are literally right downtown in front of restaurants, and those were put up during the Jim Crow era to frighten black people." Right. The Chickamauga battlefield, it does feel different. Now, I'm not going to die on that hill, and this is just one white man's opinion, but that particular battlefield, I'm like, this all seems like, here's what happened, here's what happened. There's no like, there's no poems about, glorifying anything.
No,
so
that sounds that's interesting. I was wondering what you were going to, where you're going with that, but in cases like that, whether it's a race issue or a gay issue or a woman issue, I'm always like, and I'm sure you are the same way. I'm like, whatever they say, whatever they want. I don't really have a stake in this. I'm not threatened by any of it. I'm a white guy. So I'm not going to battle or die on any of those hills. If all the women or all the gay people or all the Hispanic people, all the Jewish, black people want a thing gone because it makes them feel a certain way, I don't really, I don't care. Like, who am I? What am I going to say? I'm not.
That's sort of the end of it for me too. Yeah. I mean, sincerely, because I'm like, that's not my battle. Like the thing that pisses me off the most in the world is when I see, like, when, let's say something gets, okay, like we'll just use the statues, and they'll be like some white guy will comment, and they're like, I don't get it. This doesn't offend me at all. It's like, right. It can't offend you. You're not in the game. You know what I mean? Like, if I say I don't know, like if someone said, I saw a comedian, who was a Funny Man, said this, I think it was Funny Man yesterday. He's like, if you say fuck the Tennessee Titans, you're not hurting my feelings. You know why? I'm not a Tennessee Titans fan. I've always
said that. I've always believed. Oh, I thought you're not a Tennessee Titans fan. I thought
I am. He wasn't. Yeah.
I've always said, because I like to make fun of hardcore sports fans. I was one growing up, but I'm such an elitist. I'll go ahead and say the phrase, I grew out of them for the most part, which is when you get so passionate. I've heard you guys on your podcast talking about it, and that's when I turn it off. I'm like, they're fucking so passionate about sports, and I'm screaming. I'm listening to you guys talking about some kind of, I don't know, trade deadline, and I screamed at you. I'm like, you're not on the team.
I know.
You don't actually have a stake, but that's so pretentious of me. As long as sports are entertaining, like whatever entertains you, that's what sports are supposed to be. So it's really just me being a shithead. But and I certainly do still like to watch sports, and I dominate at playing them. That's it.
I'm sure you do. You point guard.
I'm not that good at basketball. I'm all right. I could play any sport pretty well, but I never dominated anybody. Although I did coach lacrosse when I was 20. I played college lacrosse, so I was all right. It was the lowest level. But I mean, I didn't even start on my high school team. But I was good because where we grew up. But I coached lacrosse when I was 20, and they were 7th and 8th graders. I did, in fact, dominate them and live out all the glory I never got. I crushed those 13-year-olds when I was 20.
I know. I keep one of the main reasons, like I keep going back and forth, like, do I want to have kids? Do I not want to have kids? And I always land on, well, I mean, I want to coach T-ball, and you kind of have to have one to do that, I think. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not just going to go down there and be like, y'all need me? You know, can I do this?
Yeah, where's your son, Corey?
Yeah. No, I was just in the area.
I was in the area. Do you need a coach?
Yeah, do you need a coach?
Last question for you. I could talk to you for 10 more hours. I'm really, really enjoying it. But I just wanted to get your point of view on the insurrection and how that has played out. It's been really interesting to see this debate play out. The general, conservative argument that seems to be most popular is, what about all the riots that caused billions of dollars in damage? And of course, everybody said that they weren't trying to overthrow the government. It wasn't the United States Capitol and blah, blah, blah. But what do you hear? What are your thoughts about that day? How did you react to that when it happened?
Well, I reacted, some would say poorly. I screamed on the internet and it went super viral and insane. And I ended up on CNN the next day. But the reason that I went so crazy,
that was was that your biggest?
That was because
you've had a lot of, now they're pretty regularly get a lot of views, your videos. But that one, I forgot. I was trying to remember what it was. Forgive me for not couching it that way.
No, you're fine. But it was that one and the Marjorie Taylor Greene one that both got like tens of millions apiece or whatever. But the reason that those two specific, I did, and they weren't comedy at all. I've heard, it's so weird. I've had some people share them. They're like, "This guy makes me laugh," and I'm like, "What about that was funny?" But it's just like, I guess one of those things where it's like, I mean, I'm a doughy redneck type goofy dude. Like, if I can't not be funny sometimes, I guess. But like the reason those were two very personal to me was with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I just felt like, look, man, I'm the only comedian that I know who's in her district. Like, I have to say something right now, like, because I have to. Like, I'm fucking from here. With the insurrection, it was very similar because I didn't really know what was going on. I'm not on 4chan, like I'm not in any of that shit. But a couple days before the election, my buddy had gotten accidentally added to a group text because they were trying to add another person that had his same name. And we know all these dudes. And my buddy's in this group text, and they were talking, and they go, "Hey man, are y'all going to drive up to DC to the riots?" My buddy sends me this. I'm like, what the fuck are they talking about? And they keep talking about, they're like, "Boys, y'all going to vote today? Hold the line, boys. We can't let any bullshit happen." Wow. I don't know if y'all are going to DC.
This was they were saying that in a text?
In a text, yeah. Now they didn't go. They were just talking about, like, apparently they'd heard about it, though. Like, this is a thing that people that
it was a thing. It was well organized.
So when that happened, and I see all this, I'm like, what the fuck are they talking about? And then 2 days later, the election happened, and there's this insurrection. I'm like, oh my fucking God, that's what they were like. They knew this was a calculated thing. And I was like, it was like this bombshell moment to me where I was like, oh my God, dude, QAnon people are not outliers, really. Like, as much as you wanted them to be, you wanted so bad for, listen, man, I know my area, but like, dude, that's like, there's like two of them. They're in a basement. They're not real. But like, you played football with these dudes. They're not, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
but it was scary to me because I was like, this is mainstream.
I do and I don't, because I don't know anybody personally, certainly not that I grew up with, that has told me that they believe this stuff. But have you ever gotten into a discussion with somebody, forget about like conservative views, right? Like if someone, have you had an argument or discussion with someone who believes, say, that, Democrats drinking baby's blood, or the pizza joint, Pizzagate, not Pizzagate?
Yeah, Pizzagate.
That they believe these things, Jewish space laser caused the fire. Because the point I think that needs to be made is that we're now in a place where if a certain authority says a thing, if Donald Trump says a thing, or now it's Alex Jones, Steve Bannon, they say a thing. They could have just sat around and workshopped that with their buddies.
Of course.
And then they can make everybody believe it. And it doesn't matter how absurd it is, because we've crossed into drinking the blood of babies, And I'll tell you the story because I'm sure everybody knows it after I stop recording. But I've been being called a pedophile for the last 48 hours on Twitter, and so people it's been really enjoyable. So like people will believe anything now. It would say anything you make up.
I definitely know that I've got some buddies who believe in all that shit, but I stopped. But once they brought up the first one, I was like, I'm out. I can't, like, if that's where you are, then you're gone. Like, I hate it.
Dude, I would give anything. I would give anything. And I bet you a lot of people would listen to that episode of your podcast if you had them.
Oh, for sure. To have them. Yeah.
Have you thought about it?
There's part of me that thought about it, but then the other part of me goes, dude, they're gone. The only thing that you're going to get out of this is like you're still technically giving them a platform.
Right. No, it's debatable. It's debatable.
It is debatable. It would be fucking entertaining. But I had a buddy who was like, who literally, hand to God, like we were going to play golf. And he told me about this before I even knew it was a big theory. We were driving down the road and he was like, he said something. He's like, he goes, yeah. So he goes, did you hear Tom Hanks is moving to Greece? And I was like,
yeah.
I was like, no. And he goes, you know why, right? And I was like, because he has dual. I was like, he's got dual citizenship because of his wife. He goes, no, there's no extradition laws there, and he's fucking all these kids. And I'm like, whoa, what?
Yep.
What? And he's like, yeah, man, that's what everybody's saying. I was like, who's everybody? And he's like, it's just what they're saying. And as soon I was like, oh my God, you're gone. I didn't know you were gone. I thought that you were still just a fiscal conservative. I thought you were one of those people that just go, look, man, listen, man, I don't care what the gays do. It's just my taxes. I thought that we could go through the rest of our life and me just know that you're full of shit. But now I have to see it. Like, God damn it, you're gone.
So sad.
Like when someone just goes, Tom Hanks is living in Greece because there's no extradition because he was fucking people at a pizza place. That person, that's not a person.
Does that person that you're talking about, do they have a job? I always wonder about that. Like, can you bring that to the job? Can you say that shit at the water cooler at your office if you work? I mean, I suppose I don't mean to minimize a mechanic who works in a garage, but there's something different about the types of things get said in the garage versus an insurance agency I
think there's a lot of those dudes, like they know their crowd, you know what I mean? And down
they
here,
keep it.
And I think that, like, dude, but here's the thing, man, you got to understand is like a lot of them dudes are the boss where they're at,
right?
Which is crazy. Right. And it's a point that I made. It's a point that I made when I did an interview. That was a thing that I've had to grapple with, and I think a very important thing for us to. Now, don't get me wrong, for the most part, like that type QAnon people, for the most part, are the people that just hair trigger believe it are dumb. But the people like Marjorie Greene Taylor who start it for no reason, she don't believe none of that shit.
You don't think so?
People, not all of it. She definitely don't believe all of it. Right. I think she just says stuff. Because I think what the worst thing we do is go, oh, they're dumb, they're stupid, when really they're just bad. They're not. Some of them are bad people. Some of them are not stupid at all. And when you call them stupid, a lot of times you're letting them a little bit off the hook because it's basically like you're going, they don't know no better. No, they do. They fucking well do know better.
I think Louis Gohmert is legit dumb.
Yeah, no,
I don't think he's ever playing a role because some of these guys embarrass themselves with their and it was like, you know, but it's a great point and something really important to remember. All right. I'll let you go. Don't go, though. I want to stop. But, dude, I cannot thank you enough for joining me. Really, really enjoyed this conversation. I'm so happy to see you guys continuing to do well. And I want to keep talking to you. Thank you, man. Great conversation.
Well, have me back anytime.
Well, I will, Corey. I will have you back anytime because I loved that conversation. And I'll be talking to his buddy, Trey Crowder, as well, coming up. I hope you liked it. And thank you to Dr. Mann, Dr. Michael Mann, as well. Thank you to you for supporting the podcast, for being patient with me, and not getting the news done, trying to do that Monday through Thursday. But today was a hella mess, managing all the accusations and the chaos. So we'll get back to it tomorrow because tomorrow night I'm also hanging out with you. If you are a subscriber, hope to see you at 8 p.m. The link is in today's email, which you get every day with a shot of vitamin N, which is a nature photo sent in by a listener. Just a great way to start your morning. I'm going to go post this. I'm going to go upload it so you can download it. And John Carroll is going to sing us out. Hope to see you tonight. Stand up.
had to stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, to make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up and show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.